webinar is titled Trends, Preferences, and What Works for Credit Receivables Professionals. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. First of all, my name is Matt Scudera. I'm with the Credit Research Foundation. We also have with us Mr. Robert Unger, who is a Senior Director with NACHA, and we also have Jennifer West, who is a Director with NACHA. We thank you for joining us this afternoon, and before we get going, I do have a couple of housekeeping items to run through. First, if you are on a phone that has mute, if we can ask you to put your phone on mute so there's no background noise with anybody. The second item is that we will have two polling questions this afternoon. So as we go through the presentation, we will pause at two different marks. If I could ask you then to answer the polling questions. We'll allow about 30 seconds for each one, and then we'll offer the results on those polling questions for you. And then the second is we will have a question and answer period at the end of today's presentation. The presentation will allow you, though, to submit your questions online on the right-hand side through the chat box at any point in time, but we will reference those at the end of the session. So again, we thank everybody for joining us today, and why don't we get started? First, let me offer some comments about the two organizations that are presenting today. We are on slide number 2. The first is about the Credit Research Foundation. The Credit Research Foundation is a 69-year young organization that is a nonprofit group solely focused on the area of education for credit collections and risk management. We are made up of 600 member companies of Fortune 1500-like organizations. And with that, let me just pass it over to Mr. Rob Unger, who will give us some words on NACHA.
Oh, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think we're a 40-something-year young organization, to use your vernacular there. So NACHA is the governing body for the Automated Clearinghouse Network. And what we do is we set the rules, the warranties, the roles, responsibilities, data formats for everything that goes into using an ACH transaction, whether it's for a direct deposit or a B2B payment.
Great. Rob, thank you very much for that. So let's get grounded in our presentation today. So what I want to start with is what gives us our data points and the foundation for today's webinar. And that is a survey that was done jointly between the Credit Research Foundation and NACHA. And we're focusing in on electronic payments to understand the trends that are related to the electronic payment area, as well as to define leading practices. We wanted to share the results with you of like-minded professionals who have answered the survey. So again, CRF collaborated with NACHA, and as we know, Rob indicated, NACHA is the Electronic Payments Association, and we collaborated both on the design as well as understanding the results and analyzing those results and sharing those with you today. So CRF invited its membership, of which we had 131 respondents come back and provide those results that we'll share with you today. So as I mentioned when we started, I'm going to have two polling questions. So I'm going to pause here, and we're going to have our first polling question. So Jennifer, if you could share that with us, and we'll wait about 30 seconds for everybody to answer that, and Jennifer will share the results with us.
Great. So folks were asking, what's your primary responsibility in your company? Select one. Is it credit and accounts receivable, accounts payable, treasury, finance and accounting, or other? Of course, Matt, we'd expect a lot of credit accounts receivable folks given your membership and who's participated, but good to know who else is participating. Okay, I think we're going to close the poll. And as we guessed, looks like 65% are credit and accounts receivable, 2% accounts payable, 8% treasury, 7% finance and accounting, and 19% other. So that's great. We'll now we kind of know who's on the phone. We sort of suspected who it was, but let's go ahead and get started. And Matt, as we review the agenda, I wanted to point out to folks that as you and I did the survey and evaluated the results, we kind of looked at presenting the survey in a way that isn't just a readout of the survey results, but really tries to organize it in terms of some leading issues with respect to credit professionals.
Great. Thank you, Rob. And it's great to see that we have a well-diversified audience with us today. That will provide tremendous value across the board. So let me start with today's agenda. We're going to provide an overview of what the survey was about, how we developed it, and the results of the survey. Then we're going to move into some areas such as automation and robotics, scalability, efficiency and cost containment, customer service, risk and fraud controls, and we'll conclude with some obstacles and answers. Now, one thing I do want to express here is that each one of these areas has a definition. Some of those are formal through Wikipedia, and some of those are not so formal, and we call it CRFopedia. So we'll provide the practitioner's point of view on each one of those. So that's our agenda for this afternoon. We will take about 45 minutes in today's presentation, so we'll be finishing up close to 1:45. Certainly, if there are some additional questions and/or commentary, we'll be on the phone for some additional time if we need to. So with that, why don't we move to slide number 5? And Rob, why don't you give us an overview of the survey?
Sure, will. And just to follow up on what you said, Matt, earlier, if folks do have questions, feel free to use the chat box, and we'll follow up those questions at the end. There's also handouts that you can download on the chat box, so do make use of that tool. So looking at the survey, Matt, we thought this was fascinating here at NACHA. If you think about the trajectory of electronic payments versus paper payments, I think it was about 2005 or 2006 when the Federal Reserve cited the benchmark or the watershed moment where consumer electronic payments passed the majority of consumer payments in 2005, 2006 were electronic versus paper. And here it is, years later, we're still waiting for that moment. When it's going to happen in the B2B world? And sure enough, your members are expecting that to happen certainly by the year 2020. So sometime between now and the year 2020, we're going to see that big shift away from check to ACH. I mean, it almost looks like hockey stick growth. So if you look at the breakdown, what we did, folks, is we asked people what their payments mix was 3 years prior, currently, and what they anticipated to be 3 years hence. And we asked them to tell us about their volumes with respect to checks, ACH credit payments, ACH debit payments, credit card, debit card, wire, and cash. And you see a stair step going down, if you will, in the check volume, and certainly the stair steps going up in ACH credit, a little bit in ACH debit, increasing as well in card, about the same as debit card, and increasing maybe a little bit in wire and cash going down. So it's very, very interesting slide here. When we asked people why they thought this payment shift was happening, primarily away from checks towards ACH, it was an open-ended question, and we kind of categorized, Matt, the responses in terms of a couple different things. What really stood out, the reasons for the shift, and which I think is very good news for the audience here and for companies around the U.S., is that the shift was caused by an internal push. In other words, it was a focus of the company to drive ACH payments to the company. Technology improvements over the years have certainly helped, and we're going to get into some of those reasons. But interestingly too, Matt, customers have also been pushing the companies to accept ACH. So those are the major reasons for why this shift in payments is occurring. And Matt, I know we've got some interesting verbatims, if you will, from the survey.
Sure, let me share those with folks. I'm going to focus on the highlighted ones. And to Rob's point of view here and comment, there are some tremendous shifts that are taking place. And he went through the primary drivers that are out there. Again, internal push being number one. The second was on technical improvements that are in the marketplace. And then third, being the third largest, was on the customer push. And so those are the three primary drivers. And the overarching piece here to remember is that the drivers are based on two things, both efficiency and effectiveness. So efficiency from the standpoint of speed and cost, effectiveness meaning accuracy, and control. So if you think about it from a control standpoint in a business, what the electronic payment process allows you to do, so better controls in your organization. So those are the primary drivers. And again, the overarching piece being efficiency and effectiveness. Let me go through some of the verbatims that came back on the survey, and they're fairly interesting. First, which is on internal push, which again was the primary piece here, is that number one, that marketing to customers to pay online by ACH is one of the primary pushes that's happening. So folks are reaching out and asking for that change. And with that comes the process of helping to educate their customers about wire transfers as well as ACH transactions. And also, what we're hearing back is that folks are contacting customers directly, and they get the request to move. So it's a simple kind of question and answer piece from that internal push side. And here I do want to make a point, several points. One is, when we hear the word education, quite a bit the push that's coming internally from a company to their customers, they must educate those customers in the process. And for the folks on the line, there is a real good toolkit that's available. It's through the Business Payments Coalition, and it allows you to educate yourself on discussing this with small to medium-sized businesses. And so if you need to get access to that, it can happen in several ways. One is through the Business Payments Coalition website, which is through the Federal Reserve. But if you are a CRF member or a contact of CRF, you just received the CRF newsletter today. And in that, we do have an article on the whole process, as well as the links to the Small Business Payments Toolkit. So you have direct access there. The second driver was on technical improvements. Really, it's making it easier. And what we found from our membership is that's the primary word, that it is easy to pay online, and the ease of the process has improved. So again, that driver being up at 28% is based on that it is now an accessible and a widely used process, and that folks are beginning to understand the benefits from there. So again, from a tech standpoint, it's all about the easement of paying online. I'm going to move to the next slide, which is slide number 8, and talk about the customer push. So here, the overarching area is that it indicates that there really is a true desire to move to ACH. So we talked about the internal push, but almost of equal value is the customer push. So it's the request. So it's a push or pull strategy that's taking place. And if we look at some of the primary verbatims that were out there, we hear that customers want to pay via ACH. Again, it's a desire for them. And then the other area we see is that the AP departments are finally understanding that the cost savings of ACH versus a check, a traditional check, are just outstanding, and it's easy for them, and they want to convert to ACH simply by asking them. So there's both a push and pull kind of strategy here that's driving, but certainly all pushing in the same direction. Now, if we think about the cost aspect of it here, there's some interesting outcomes. First of all, addressing those highlighted areas, what are the benefits? Well, there's a working capital management benefit that takes place. But secondly, we're also hearing about the ability to handle shrinking headcount demands, and that automation of payments is one of those drivers that helps fulfill that need within a business. So from an automation standpoint, it reduces the human capital requirements on both sides of the equation, both on the accounts receivable, but certainly on an accounts payable side as well. So there's certainly benefits there. And what we're also hearing is that firms that are accepting ACH payments and able to transition most of their customers to that area are able to automate a significant amount of the cash application process. And from a human capital standpoint, they're able to reduce that headcount by as much as 75%. And that's reduce or allocate them to other areas, which may be collections, risk management, et cetera. So there's certainly a significant cost savings within a business. We'll start to address these a little bit later in the commentary in the webinar, but did want you to be aware of those. Let's move to slide number 9 and talk about some of the other areas. A little bit smaller, but certainly a significant impact and a grounding in a knowledge standpoint when thinking about the other side of the table, meaning from a customer's perspective, what's happening. So when we talk about card and bank pushes, we're primarily talking about purchasing cards here. And of great significance here is that although from a percentage standpoint it's fairly small, bank cards or purchasing cards are the fastest growing payment segment in the marketplace. So for the credit professional, they should be aware of that, right? It's an opportunity to engage in that, but certainly understand why. And customers are pushing for credit card payments, and credit card companies are pushing as well. Now, the significance from the payable side or the customer side here is that there are some direct savings for them. So this makes it advantageous for them in a couple of areas. First of all is the ease of the program. The program is fairly easy to use and fairly easy to implement since most companies have a credit card relationship on the travel side of their business. They can certainly move to a purchasing side. With that, the primary benefit that will be seen from a treasury standpoint, and this is putting yourself in the seat of your customer, is they gain additional float time by using a credit card. So let me give a quick example here, and this is by no means saying that the terms are standard, but just purely an example. If your customer's terms are 30 days and they pay you in 30 days via a check, they may realize that the money departs their business maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days later. So in essence, from invoice date to payment date, they had 33, 34, 35 days of use of your product, and certainly they had the float time there. But if they move to a credit card program, they typically don't have to pay for that credit card until 30 days after the transaction. So you can see that there was a 30-day term plus 30 days of float. So from a customer treasury standpoint, they may have had 60 days use of those funds compared to something prior to that. So advantageous, and again, one of the reasons that they push it. The other area that I do want to reflect upon is that there is a rebate program that is typically tied to that, meaning from your customer standpoint, every time they pay with a credit card, they are receiving a rebate from that credit card company. Now, as a prior practitioner and owner of both AR and AP for a fairly large retail organization, I can tell you that I was able to transition a significant amount of my business over to a purchasing card program, and I received both float time and rebate. And that rebate was several $100,000. So, and I wasn't a large company, medium-sized, $5 billion firm, but I was able to bring in at least $750,000 a year in a rebate program to my business. So you can understand why it's advantageous from a customer standpoint. Now let's move on to some of the other mentions that happen specifically about checks. And one of the top ones out there, and I'm going to highlight this, is that there's an increase in fraud with checks. So still on page number 9. And again, so why is it advantageous to move to an electronic platform? It is to help ease the fraud process and that increasing fraud that is taking place in a business. And the cost of fraud is certainly gaining as we move through the payment cycle process. And so again, from a control standpoint, electronic payments certainly make sense to folks, and to move as much over to electronic payments as they can. So I'm going to move on to slide number 10 and let Rob share with us the data point.
Sure, thanks, Matt. Great commentary, by the way, on the verbatims, and talking about the reasons for some of that shift in payments. We also asked respondents about how do you prefer to be paid? We asked them if the preference was ACH credit, check, wire, ACH debit, credit card, cash, or debit card. And wow, as NACHA, the Electronic Payments Association, with responsibility for the ACH network, we're feeling the love. Overwhelmingly, respondents preferred to have customers pay them via ACH credit. And Matt, I know you're going to speak to some of the reasons why they preferred ACH credit, as well as some of the reasons why folks maybe selected some other payment types.
Sure. So let's ground ourselves again in what Rob just said. It was almost two-thirds, actually it was more than two-thirds of the respondents say that their number one preference is to be paid via ACH. Later on we'll reflect on that as we look at some of the actual numbers, but again it's the desire that's out there. And what we hear overwhelmingly is that ACH allows for, one, automation. Two, it also lowers the cost in the whole payment process. There may be bank fees associated with it, but when you think about the linear approach of the payment, the overall cost is much, much lower via ACH. And people are saying, one, it's very clean. So you can automate your process. You can look at Autocash application. And with that ACH is the number one choice of all individuals. Now they also indicate that speed is a certain impact there, and it's the least expensive form of payment. And they get their money much quicker. They have cash maximization, and what we hear overwhelmingly is that people can begin to anticipate when that cash will come in. So what it does is it removes the traditional snail mail gamble that's continuing to get worse in the U.S., and it provides specificity to when those funds will come in. So it allows for a more accurate cash forecasting standpoint. So not only funds that are actually in your bank quicker, but from a forecasting standpoint, it is much, much more accurate than any other method, particularly that method of traditional checks. And from a certainty standpoint, as we look at the bottom of page 11, knowing that the payments will arrive on a specific date is great for the Treasury Department. So again, these are the verbatims coming direct from practitioners, but it certainly reflects on the survey results of what we see both on the CRF side, but also the NACHA side. So let's move on to page 12. And let's continue with some of the same areas as we did before. Let's talk a little bit about the ACH debit. So for folks that are on the phone that may not be familiar with that, an ACH debit is when you go pull funds directly out of your customer's bank account. So it is a growing area in the U.S., certainly more popular in Europe right now, but it's beginning to gain traction here in the U.S. And what this also provides is that you will know exactly when you'll be paid and how much you'll be paid. And it reduces the delinquency in your portfolio because, again, your customer is allowing you to go in directly on a specified date to pull the funds out of their bank account to clear your receivables. And so, again, like I said before, it is continuing to grow in the U.S. And gain traction, and certainly popular these days over in Europe. In some cases, it is a standard in some of the relationships over there. And from a check standpoint, what I'd like to do is I'd like to focus on the last box that's highlighted down there. And why I want to focus on this was a direct comment from several folks, and that's why it is highlighted, where it says there's little to no costs on our end from a check standpoint. And it says credit card and ACH, all electronic forms come with fees. So while there are fees associated with those types of payments, as you think more broadly and you think about the full linear approach, that approach is less money than a check would be. So in its potentially silo perspective, yes, there are costs, and check may be easier to process. But what the electronic fee area, electronic payments allow you to do is think about the float that we had just mentioned. Think about the cash flow specificity to your business. And if you think about the automation that we had just mentioned, where you can automate a significant amount of your receivables in the cash app process, again, you can impact the human capital side. So on an overall basis, it is much, much cheaper, gains you better specificity into your business, and from a financial standpoint, from a float perspective, allows you to invest your money much quicker than you would have through a check process. So emphasize this area and that in its linear approach that ACH and electronic has many, many more advantages to it than purely a check payment process. So this just about covers the overview. I do want to just hit upon two other points. I'm going to move to slide 13. That is on credit card, and I had talked a little bit about credit card before, but the point here says, although credit cards are higher transaction costs, the reduced risks and process efficiencies tip the AR process in their favor, and that is certainly true. And so I do want to highlight that area. When we think about wire transfers, as Rob had indicated earlier, the trend may be down slightly in that because ACH now has such greater advantages, but it does allow for same-day receipt, and it does allow for specificity and accuracy of your funds. So again, areas to consider in the electronic payment area. Rob, I'm going to pause for a second and just see if you had any additional comments before I move on to the agenda on page 14.
Nothing in particular, Matt. I think it was just great to be able to not only see what the preference was and why, and very much appreciate your commentary that, if you look, I guess, more organically at the organization functions with respect to forecasting and head count and accuracy and control, certainly that those are some of the main drivers that are really, that people are citing regarding the preference for ACH.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. I'm going to move into our second bullet point, which is on automation and robotics. And you can see the definition that we have here. And again, ground ourselves that we are talking about the payment and application process primarily here as the benefit of electronic payments. And as I move into slide 15, and we talk about the benefits of electronic payments with automation and robotics, what I want to highlight here is that the area of electronic payments focuses specifically on those 5 bullet points that we see in the lower half of the slide. It allows for reduced labor requirements. Again, we see folks in organizations that are reducing the Cash App human capital side or redeployment of those folks by as much as 75%. It allows for lower processing costs and improved data accuracy. Again, reducing some of the human capital side from the cost perspective, but really it's understanding the information that's coming in. It comes in a quicker fashion and with more accuracy as we're allowed to and able to transfer some of the remittance advice coming through. It allows for traceability, impacting the lost check area. There are certainly less lost ACH payments, and certainly it's traceable all the way through. Electronic payments also allow for scalability. We're going to hit this a little bit later as well as we talk about some customer service features. But the number of payments coming through is not highly impacted by technology today. So you can push more through technology with very little impact to that technology and to the cost. And then, ultimately also at the end, there's less fraud control. So fraud is certainly prevalent in all areas of payments, but in this particular area has the least amount of fraud compared to some of the other areas, such as a typical payment by check, which is there is a lot of fraud that's taking place in that area today. So let's move on to slide number 16. And we're going to talk about some of the payment types that are accepted. Now, when we looked at the population of respondents, all respondents said that they accept check. And we also found that almost all respondents, 96.8%, accept ACH payments. And this is important, and it's important because it's the foundation that allows for automation for companies to move forward. So while it may not be the largest form of payment that they accept, most folks are accepting this today. And most folks have the ability then to start to think about automation because they have that foundation. Again, the foundation being ACH credit payments coming through. I'm going to move on to slide number 17. And let's talk a little bit about the payment mix here. And so when we think about that, this is the annual percentage of each payment type that is received. So of all the payments that are received, 49% are currently in 2017 still by check. Now 28% are by ACH credit. Now if we look before, if we reflect back on what the desired payment type was, most folks indicated that their desire was to receive those ACH credits, which only 28% are currently receiving. So there is an opportunity for improvement by allowing more ACH payments to come through. And we'll talk a little bit about how do you get those numbers up in just a bit. Let's move on to slide number 18. And we're going to talk about the Autocash process here. And I'm going to focus first on the bottom half of the slide where it is highlighted in blue. And what you'll see here is that 65 or 66.5% of the respondents are doing less than 60% cash auto posted on their accounts. And so of all the transactions, 20% of the folks are saying that they do 50% or less of the transactions that come through. Now from a benchmark standpoint, I'm going to focus on the top line where you see the 81 to 100%, so 81% to 100% of all transactions coming through that are auto posted. There is a significant population out there, 19.1%, that are reaching those top goals. And a matter of fact, there is 5.6% of the respondents that are actually in that top tier of 91 to 100% of all transactions coming through are automatically applied. And those are the folks with Autocash technology as well as accepting electronic payments all the way through their process. So applicable maybe to their industry, but certainly an opportunity for success. So I'm going to pause here for a second. Rob, I'm going to ask you if you have any additional commentary.
Yeah, I think, Matt, as we progress through the presentation here and the analysis of the data, this is a huge opportunity for improvement at companies. And we see that, only 5.6% of the respondents are posting 91 to 100% without any intervention. So this is causing a big headache. We hear this all the time as we go out and we talk to companies, this issue of remittance information and cash application. Interestingly, or maybe sadly, we did, NACHA conducted a pretty extensive survey in 2014. We talked to 200 U.S. companies, 200 international companies, and we talked about remittance and cash application. And the needle really hasn't moved much when we look at the results here. A little unfortunate, but I think as we we'll discuss further, a big opportunity here to really improve this, and will improve a lot of benchmarks at your company if you can improve these rates.
Thank you, Rob. Let's go to slide number 19. And so the next item we want to discuss is scalability. And here what we're talking about is the capability of a system, network, or process to handle a growing amount of work, or its potential to enlarge to accommodate that growth. And as we think about that, I'm moving on to slide number 20. What do electronic payments allow you to do? And so, as we mentioned before, applying both electronic payments as well as technology allows your company to scale without increasing resources out there. We just completed a survey of folks that sell to retail environments. So you may not be a retail type organization or selling into retail, but I think the foundation here is the same. And that is that we are truly in a global economy. And many firms today are selling on a global basis. In this particular case, we found that 79% of those companies in the survey that were selling into retail were looking to the global economy as their specific area of growth. Now, if we combine that with what we typically hear about cost containment and doing more with less and the opportunities that are in front of us, again, electronic payments allow for that scalability by reduction of assets that are required to produce the same type of function with more accuracy and more controls about it without increasing the expense side. So again, allowing that scalability, more throughput in a particular area with the same platform. And so it does allow for a company to grow significantly, but not increase the cost associated with that business. So let's move on to slide 21. And I just want to demonstrate a little bit here of what I was talking about the growth. And all respondents, so I used the example of the retail environment. When I think about today, all of the respondents that came in, 80% or 88% of those companies were strictly U.S. focused, and only 12% were non-U.S., meaning so 12% of their sales went to non-U.S. environment. And as our economy continues to evolve and change, and we move to slide number 22, we can see how those numbers have changed significantly. So those numbers are now 79% domestic, 21% global. And that is a very significant shift in what is going to be a 3-year, now 2.5-year basis. So, it's opening up quite a bit. And so moving to electronic helps support that throughput without expanding the human capital side of the business, or allows you for redeployment of that human capital to other areas. Again, the foundation being moving away from the paper environment to driving your customers to electronic payments all the way through. Now, moving on to slide 23, there are also some barriers to ACH adoption and the implications here for a global enterprise. Let me just highlight the top 3. So the first one is, this is again what we hear back is, 1, my customers are not capable of sending an ACH payment. That's followed by, my customers are capable of sending ACH payments, but my customers cannot submit remittance advice with their payment. And then the third one is, my company has not invested in the proper systems and or human resources to respond effectively to ACH adoption. So there are some obstacles. There are some things to getting over that adoption rate. And again, I'm going to pause for a second here. I'm going to let Rob Unger jump in and offer some commentary.
Sure, Matt. And I must climb upon my soapbox here, if you will so indulge me, and say that a lot of these barriers, I don't see them as barriers. So the first one, my customers are not capable of sending ACH payments. Certainly there are customers that are not able to do that, but I'm surprised by the response rate here. We know from what's been driving the trend towards ACH is that some customers are asking for it. So we'll talk about some opportunities here to address this barrier. Some customers are sending ACH but not sending the remittance. Again, if they can send the ACH, they can send remittance. The ACH can accommodate both payments plus information, and it's just a matter of do they want to make use of that opportunity. One thing I'm very surprised about, Matt, is that if you look at the barriers, the ACH system does not allow for effective exchange of remittance that is needed to facilitate automated or manual posting. That's 17.9%. Plus, if you add in my bank is unable to accept, process, and provide reporting of remittance, that's just flat out wrong. So there's 22.5% of the people who have cited these two situations as barriers, when in fact it's not true. The ACH system does facilitate the exchange of remittance information, and banks, by rule, are required to provide that remittance information. So there could be an opportunity for some further education here just around some of the functions and features that are available in the ACH.
Great. Thank you, Rob. And to our point earlier about the education and the available resources, they're available in several areas. And again, if you need help in that area, please reach out to us. I think to Rob's point, and as a practitioner, I certainly appreciate the changes that were made in the environment that allow for not only the payment, but the remittance advice now to come through, and it's available to all folks as well. So let's move on to slide number 24. Real quick, we're just going to talk about efficiency and cost containment here. And I think what we want to do is, sounds like we have a polling question in front of us.
Yeah, just real quick, folks, we're just wondering if your company tracks specific metrics and or costs related to making payments and receiving payments. So, you know, it's your bank fees, but it could be anything else, whatever your metrics are with respect to that. Very interested to hear if companies are tracking this or not.
We'll pause for 30 seconds, let everybody answer it.
Matt, at the company you worked for, did you guys track specific costs and metrics around making and receiving payments?
The answer to that, Rob, is yes. I was fortunate enough to be able to track some of that detail, and you know, again, looking at it from a global standpoint, understanding from where I needed to make payments from, different cost mechanisms across the way. But it also allowed for a springboard for me to move into certain areas of payment types. Again, moving to an electronic environment. So that's why my metrics were important to me. I needed to make people aware of what the opportunity was in.
Well, Matt, that's great, and you're we're looking at the poll results here. So, with respect to the question, does your company track specific metrics and are costs related to making payments and receiving payments? Matt, you were with the majority. 60% said yes, but surprisingly, 40% said no. They don't track that. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and I know it's difficult. Companies are all set up differently. You may have legacy systems and mergers that have complicated processes. And we know this is difficult because we have tried to ask companies about their costs to kind of benchmark different costs. So when you consider your all-in payment costs and metrics, you know, certainly you look at your bank fees, your network fees, but there's also related services that you may be using either through a bank or a third party with respect to receivables concentration or lockbox or fraud controls. There's reconciliation and cash application, and that can be you know, more manual or more automated depending upon how you receive those payments, if they're in check or they're coming with the ACH payment. Certainly you've got exceptions and disputes, and maybe some payment channels are more prone to having more exceptions. You've got compliance issues. Certainly with ACH payments, you've got NACHA audits, and with credit card, you've got PCI. There's fraud and losses you have to look at with respect to the channel. Matt, you mentioned that, you know, checks experience a higher fraud rate than other payment types. So that has to be part of your check cost when you're looking at how much does it cost for me to receive or make a check payment. You've got security, equipment, reporting costs, processes that might be unique to a certain payment type. For example, you know, you really only have escheatment or check stock costs with check payments. So it's tough to do, but boy, I think it's just so important to be able to understand your metrics, whatever they are, so you know how you're performing and you know what kind of options you have in terms of investments and possibly influencing customers. Okay, so when we look at the payments remittance advice and the channel, people like to receive that remittance advice in. We've got some different options here. When an ACH file is sent with the remittance, or your vendor sends a BAI lockbox file, and I apologize if I'm talking alphabet soup here, but these are standardized file formats coming from a network, and these are your best opportunity for automation. We see that 55.6% of the people do prefer that, and that's going to be your best opportunity for automation. Now, if your preference is email and mail, I understand there's a lot of reasons for that. There's system reasons, there's customer reasons, that's how they send it, but that's going to be much more difficult to automate. And Matt, that's why we have such a low Autocash rate right now, is because of the way this remittance information is being sent at times. So Matt,
thank you, Rob.
With respect to the, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to share some of the verbatim activity here as well, and drive through you know, some of the reasoning behind it. And the comments that came directly were, receiving the remittance advices along with the payment is more efficient. I think we've demonstrated that. It does not require anybody to contact anyone, go to a website, etc. Again, this is the springboard for automation and allows folks to certainly automate the process and hit that top tier that we had mentioned, folks to get close to that 90–95% auto cash rate. And as we look at the bottom quote here, it's about the auto upload. Again, it's the same concept. It's about touchless application. Again, it's about efficiency and accuracy in the process, and it speaks for itself. As I move on to slide 28, and I think about some of the comments about like email. An email is quick, it's easy, it's acceptable. It is in the perspective of that if that's your first step into the automation process, but the next biggest leap is to move to fully electronic and get away from that email and the responsibility of going in and finding it, etc. And some folks say they'd rather get an email rather than go to multiple portals. Well, what I would suggest here is that combination of electronic payment with technology allows your systems to go to those portals without the human intervention. Again, increasing your efficiency and your effectiveness as well. Moving on to slide 29, when we think about just the mail route, it says, we've heard folks say, practitioners say, we want the remittance to accompany the check. Well, again, today's environment, Rob, as you had talked about, you can get the electronic payment and you can get all the remittance advice that goes with it, and it is available to everybody. So it is a standard in the marketplace, and folks on the line should certainly understand that. And the last piece on this page that I did want to emphasize when we talk about accessing customers' online portals is that, again, downloads can be automated, and we hear about web addresses changing, et cetera. That can be an obstacle. Well, the number of web addresses that change compared to the total transactions you move through are very small. So you may have a hiccup once in a while, but the benefits certainly outweigh the costs. Well, I'm going to turn slide number 30 over to you when we talk about preferred format.
Yeah, so earlier, Matt, we talked about the preferred channel. Do they want the file coming from the bank or the vendor, or email, or mail? And now we're talking about the format of that data. And so we asked them, what's your preferred format for receiving your remittance information? Is it EDI, PDF, Excel spreadsheet, BAI, BAI2, which is a lockbox format, other freeform text, or ISO 20022. And EDI and the BAI, BAI2 are standardized formats. In other words, a standards body has defined these formats and to be machine readable. And so these are really the best opportunity for automation. So the 37.6% that preferred EDI and the 11.1% that preferred BAI, BAI2 with respect to checks and lockbox, those folks have the best opportunity for automation. And we didn't correlate it, but I would suspect the companies that have this preference also have the higher cash application rates. With respect to the others, the preference for PDF, for Excel spreadsheet, for freeform text, again, there could be system reasons, there could be reasons with respect to your customer preferences, but these are going to be the most difficult to automate, and I would suspect as well that those with the lower cash application hit rates, et cetera, would have these as the preference, just due to the nature that it's just much more difficult to automate that.
Let's just chat about customer service real quick. And the reference point that I want to provide is on slide number 32. And it's who or what determines which payment types or remittance advice methods you receive from customers. And what we hear through the survey is that the customer decides in many cases. If you remember to some of the slides previously, though, about the drivers, there seems to be a mutual relationship from a customer and a vendor standpoint, and both want the same thing. So although the customer may decide in many cases, the vendor perspective, they are driving towards the same thing. So there's a mutual agreement and benefit for everybody. Now on slide 33, where we talk about incentives to encourage ACH payments, we find that 9% of the companies offer an incentive for for somebody to move over to ACH. So it's, again, how do you drive the process? So, the next question here is, how do you persuade a customer to move over? And as we move on to slide 34, we're going to talk about risk and fraud controls, and we're going to answer that question for you. So, Rob, do you want to take slide 35 for us?
Sure will. So, Matt, we heard earlier in the verbatims about payment types that some people specifically mentioned the concern with fraud with respect to checks, and you've brought it up several times that an automated environment gives you more control, gives you more insight, more visibility, more predictability, and I think that's a general theme here when you look at electronic payments. They're going to help you reduce risk and exposure to fraud. I know the Association for Financial Professionals releases an annual fraud survey every year, and I think some 70% of respondents said they had been the victim of or had been or caught some kind of a fraud incident with respect to checks. ACH is very low by comparison. So check payments, greater risk of fraud. Check payments lack recourse. If someone cashes a fraudulent check, your money's gone. Unlike ACH and some other electronic systems, you do have opportunities to reverse and get those funds returned. So yeah, just reiterating what you've been saying, Matt, the electronic environment is going to help you not only with your processes and your costs, but also minimize risk and fraud exposure.
Right. And Rob, you're going to bring us through the obstacles and answers as well, so why don't you keep going?
Yeah, so folks, when I was on my soapbox earlier, I was discussing how a lot of those barriers to ACH adoption, really, I don't see them as barriers. Again, we mentioned, some customers certainly aren't going to be able to send ACH, but we know customers are asking to send you ACH. We know there's some system issues and that kind of thing. We know there's some education gaps, but there's really a lot of things that companies can do to improve their auto posting. If you look at your trading partner agreement, you can include remittance specifications in that agreement. Hey, you're going to pay us by ACH, and include these remittance, this remittance information. We know incentives are an option as well. They're not widely used. We see them more used maybe in the consumer environment, but we know that's an option. If you know your payment costs, and if you know what your opportunity are with respect to if you move a population from check to ACH and what money you have to play with, if you will, to invest in either systems or customer behavior, you can help drive customer change there. Incentives can be pretty powerful. One thing we didn't talk about, particularly for those companies, and this happens a lot with smaller companies that can't send you ACH, offer them the ACH debit. We have in our handouts, guys, if you look on your dialog box and you check the handouts, we have several handouts here that really illustrate some of these points. One is around an ACH debit case study, and the other is opportunities with respect to not only educating customers on the availability of payments plus information in the ACH, but also how to improve it. So a few handouts in there. Just following up, it takes some investment. Educating your customers, Matt, I know you mentioned this. Some companies offer a testing facility to verify compliance. You can partner with banks and vendors as well to do scrubs with respect to your cash applications. So really, it's not a throw your hands up in the air, oh my, what are we going to do? There's a lot of things that companies can do to improve the Autocash app process. With respect to changing customer behavior, you saw the slide earlier, what works. One thing works is asking customers. Matt, we saw a lot of examples of where customers had great success reaching out to customers. I know the AR credit department maybe took a day or two and called customers. They had a campaign. Another company talked about hiring an intern. But we know that sometimes we just got to, join the bridges here, or bridge the gap, if you will, for my bridge metaphor, and just get people together and make sure that there's an awareness of the opportunity. Technology improvement is another big driver. We know that there's a big investment in portals and whatnot and automation. So again, good opportunities for improving your processes and your cash application. Finally, I would say, with respect to the barriers, Matt, we have to stop blaming the bad customers, right? The customers who aren't capable of sending it, or the customers who aren't sending it right. We've outlined some specific actions that you can take, some specific actions that companies have done to help bridge this gap and help customers pay them electronically and to automate those processes. And I think advice again here is for those 40% that aren't capturing metrics and costs, I just think that's something you really need to do, because I would suspect maybe you're the ones that are struggling with the low cash application rates. If you can demonstrate that, if you can develop that ROI, hopefully you can get some investment to make some improvements. So that's about it for my analysis, Matt, and I'm sure you've got some wrap-up.
Yeah, just a little bit of wrap-up. We are at the top of the hour and took a little bit longer than we had expected, so one, I apologize to the folks on the line. But there was good detail, Rob. Matter of fact, there was great detail. I would like to thank the participants today on the phone for joining us. I'd also like to thank both Rob and Jennifer for their input, their support, and their professionalism as we went through today's presentation. But just as important, building the surveys and analyzing the results. And to the folks on the line, you have resources available to you, both through CRF and NACHA, and I would encourage you to reach out to either side, both sides, whatever makes sense for you, as we're here to support you in your journey from paper to electronic, and get you to the automated states where a lot of firms are today. So again, just a big thank you. We will have, Rob and I will hang on the phone if there are some questions. Please use the chat box. We'd love to answer those for you. And if you need to go, we certainly understand that. But if there are questions, we'll stay on the line and help answer those and get you some results. So, listen, I hope everybody has a safe, a happy, and enjoyable 4th of July holiday weekend for those that are hopping off the phone, and for those that are going to stay on, we will be here to support you. So, listen, we hope you have a great afternoon.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Oh. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just going to say we had mostly some comments and a couple questions, but those people have actually left. So let me scroll down and see. We do have a question here. Is there additional cost for ACH payments with the CTX format? Do other formats of ACH payments allow for remittance to be included?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when they talk about the CTX, that's an ACH payment type. That's an ACH payment type for a B2B payment that can include 800,000 characters of remittance information. And the question was, does it cost anything in addition to make that kind of ACH payment and to include that remittance information? The answer is yes. But importantly, NACHA is not charging you. This is your bank, something to negotiate with your bank. We know this is the reason why a lot of folks are sending this remittance information by emails, because it does cost a little bit more with respect to their bank. But I would think there's opportunities on the accounts payable side as well, in terms of the controls you can establish by using an ACH payment that includes remittance information. And again, if you look at your all-in costs, while on the surface email may seem easier, I think when you look at trying to track down and trace information and other kinds of things, do dispute adjudication, you would find that even though it might cost you more on your bank sheet, that would be cheaper in the long run.
All right. Thanks, Rob. I do see a couple questions about asking either for a replay or for a copy of the presentation. So if you go to the handout section, the presentation is in there along with a couple of other resources. So you could certainly download it from there. Also, all of you will be receiving a survey for this webinar, and included in that will be a recording from today. So.
Yeah, I think it's going out like 2 days from now or something. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question, is there a tool available to help calculate the all-in payment cost?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. NACHA does have a tool through our consulting service. If you go to elevation.nacha.org, there's a calculator that helps you calculate some of those costs, and a lot of companies provide similar kinds of calculators, but you can certainly contact us if you looking for some help with that issue.
Okay, I see another question here on automation for ACH. Is this done through the bank?
Yeah, automation through the ACH it could be done through a bank or a partner. Matt, how did you do it when you were at your company?
You're exactly right. So we took two avenues. There's through your bank for support. Sometimes your banks have tool sets they will provide to you. And then depending on your scope and where you want to head, there are also third parties that will help automate the payment process and receipt through that. Now, through CRF, we have a number of platinum partners that are on our website that do that, and I would encourage you to take a look at those folks. So they'll be on the receiving end. So once the electronic payment comes in, how do you automate it all the way through, whether you're an SAP, Oracle, or other shop? And then your bank will certainly help you with the send. If you're on an AP side, they'll do the send side. So there are a number of folks that will help with that process, and encourage you to take a look at them.
Okay.
Great. One more. We have, how long do you have to pull back an ACH transaction?
Okay, so I'm assuming this question is coming from accounts payable, right? So say you made an error. And you sent the wrong amount, you sent it to the wrong payee. You have 5 days to initiate what's called a reversal. Now, if you're on the credit or credit or receivable side, if the question came from somebody there, the concern probably more is when do I know the payment is absolutely final? And a business that you have debited, for example, has up to 2 days to dispute whether or not that debit was authorized. After 2 days, they can no longer dispute that, and the payment is final. With respect to a credit, the payment's final once you received it. In very rare circumstances, the sender who has made an error can reverse that payment, and it's only the situation where those funds should not be yours. It can't have anything to do with a contract dispute or anything like that.
Okay, thank you, Rob. What is the main reason why a customer would prefer to pay credit card versus ACH?
I would even hate to answer
that one a little bit. So,
go ahead.
Former practitioner having the AP side of the house as well. There were two benefits. The one was I received as a AP person 30 days of additional float time, meaning I would create the transaction through a credit card, but I wouldn't have to pay for it for 30 days. So again, if you're moving through millions of dollars, you can do the calculations to get the float on that. The other was clear. It was a rebate that I would receive directly from the credit card company. So each sale or each payment that I made, I got a portion of that back in my agreement with them. Everybody's agreement's different. They're all negotiated separately. So I couldn't give you structure and fee structure behind that. But those are the two primary. Again, float and a direct payment on every transaction that went through. So you can think about that as a credit practitioner, and you may have some ability to negotiate with your customer if they're paying you by a credit card, a purchasing card, or some other form that's out there very similar to a credit card.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. I think we have another question.
We are getting our customers charging us $1 because we are accepting their payment via ACH. Are you getting other people with the same situation?
All right, so this is kind of a new thing, Matt. There are companies out there, I'll call them, I don't know, accounts payable providers or hubs. So they're going to companies and saying, we'll send out your payments for you. Anybody who accepts a card, we're going to send it by card. Anybody who accepts an ACH, we'll send it ACH. But there are some companies that are now, and these are third parties, that are now charging fees to the receiver of that ACH. And they're trying to implement, I'll call it for lack of a better term, an ACH rebate model, similar to the credit card rebate model. So in other words, they're kicking back some of that fee to the accounts payable department. So again, it's nothing that NACHA is involved with or can control, but I know market-wise, that is something that is happening.
Good detail, Rob.
Any other questions?
Let me see. What could we do to encourage our customers to pay via the ACH?
Matt?
Yeah, the first thing I want to mention is ask. Simply ask. I did a mail campaign. One letter went out, and I got 12% of my portfolio to come in via ACH, those that weren't already paying me ACH. So that was a simple ask. The other piece that I would like to mention is to help educate them. And the Small Business Payments Toolkit that's provided by the Business Payments Coalition, which is part of the Federal Reserve, is a great resource. And again, the link to that and details are in this quarter's CRF News that was released this morning, as well as if you go to the Business Payments Coalition website, they have a link out there as well. So I would recommend that you take a look at that. And then the 4 documents, the handouts that are located on the right-hand side of the screen from NACHA are great resources as well. So I'd suggest that you print those out and take a look at them. And what they all do is very simple. They provide a value proposition to make your customer, educate your customer on, to get them to move over to the electronic payment world.
All right. Matt, that's a wrap. That's all the questions. Wow, it's just been so great collaborating with you and your members on this presentation. We learned a lot, and yeah, it was just a great experience.
Rob, I repeat your words exactly, and I know we went over our time. We still had a significant number of companies hanging on with us, and we appreciate that. Again, we're your resources. If we can help you, either from the NACHA side or the CRF side, please reach out to us. Be more than happy to support in any way that we can. And again, I hope everybody has a safe, healthy, and a happy 4th of July weekend. And we're going to call it a wrap at this point.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.